So, didn't sleep very well last night. I think that probably most survivors of child sexual assault are not sleeping very well these days. And I wanted to talk about a video that I made, a book that I wrote. This is the jacket I wore when I sold my life story in a definitely life-changing book deal after many rejections and being told it is an unimaginable horror and you cannot write or publish stories. Literally, we don't do stories about the children of God because the abuse is too horrible. I also got a lot of, we don't do stories by women in the military because nobody reads them, because I think we know the abuse is too horrible. And, you know, even going through the writing process and like toning down most of it, cutting out a lot and being like, told your story is too horrific for adults to handle. Like, I survived it at 5 years old. We need adults to be able to handle it. For the longest time, I thought it was my responsibility to protect other adults from my story. I remember when I first wrote down my story, took it to my boss as my military career was blowing up. And I remember thinking like, he has 4 little girls and I'm probably just going to change his life forever. And I have since then very much realized that it is not 6-year-old Daniela's responsibility to protect adults from what adults do to 6-year-old little girls. I'm also having this discussion from the context of I am firmly aware that boys and men are also sexually assaulted. Don't come here into my conversation where I am talking about girls and women on the platform that I have built, and all lives matter me with that. You want to talk about it? Go talk about it. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, someone even told me there was no market for my stories, straight white Christian Republican man, because he didn't think a girl from Milwaukee who had never had anything bad happen to her could relate to growing up in a sex cult or being a woman at war. Which I responded, I reject the that there is a nice girl from Milwaukee that has never had anything bad happen to her. 1 in 4 children in America is sexually assaulted by a family member or a religious leader or another trusted adult. 1 in 4. You know why I supported Kamala? Because she talked about child sexual assault every chance she gets. Doesn't matter what policies and freedoms and fucking shit you have if children are still getting raped in their homes. You know what? I bet if we can raise a generation of children not getting raped, they'll fix all the problems. And stop fucking hitting your kids. They're not going to forgive you. Anyway, I took that story that everybody said I couldn't sell and sold it for enough money to buy my pilot husband an airplane. Yes, I sold my cult book and bought my pilot husband an airplane called a Mooney. Deep level joke. And everybody said it couldn't be done. And I sold it wearing this jacket for a number I'm not allowed to tell you, but it had a lot of zeros. Then I took the publishing of that book and built platforms and sold that book on the internet, my essentially trauma story that also has some good points, for enough money to indie publish my next book, The Culting of America, which I thought was firmly in the realm of pop psychology, but has been voted one of the best history books of January. So I'm now a historian. And I did all of that by telling a story that everybody said was too horrible to tell. And my book is a work of literature. It's not just a trauma story. And wearing this jacket as I sold to a team of 6 amazing women at St. Martin's Press, a subsidiary of Macmillan, who would invest in and publish this book, they asked me, so what happens? You know, everybody was nervous about publishing a story by a lady that seems to be calling the United States Army a cult. And they said, what happens if, and definitely talks a lot about the sexual assault in the United States military. So what happens if this goes viral and you're on Fox News and they send, you know, essentially angry white general to debate you? And I said to them, ladies, I promise you that any man anyone sends in to debate me will have just been briefed on these topics. I lived in their world, and they have never even deigned to hear our stories. I'm going to win that argument. And I had sitting behind me a book that the marketer had worked on. And so my editor was like, hey, Laura, look at that. She's got your book back there. And I said to them, ladies, it's almost like I was an intelligence officer. I think I got $50,000 more just for that. So today, I was reaching out to all my mentors and the people who believed in me and college professors who taught me history. I'm pitching a talk to University of Texas at Dallas. And, you know, I've been doing university talks, but usually that's housed in the psychology department because I talk about cults and coercive control and bad leaders. And this is essentially, as mentioned, intended to be a pop psychology book. However, to recap, I took my literature degree and all that writing this one professor taught me and made my story into a work of literature. And then I used that work of literature to fund myself while I researched and wrote and invested in the next book that is a history book in addition to everything else. Here's this other teacher in the arts and humanities department, this historian that had a huge impact on me, that I got to do a study abroad with. I went back to Guanajuato, Mexico, a place I had been trafficked in as a teenager. And now I have good memories from there. And I am currently a popular political content creator, including everything I know about Latin America and how relevant it is to America today. And what I didn't get from growing up there, I got from this history professor who's a Mexicanista teacher and teaches other, I think did a history, Cuba history class with her too, and the Latin American literature professor. I'm going to go hand deliver them some books when I'm there, hopefully. So, and even the act of creating an audiobook, right? Taking a written document that was intended as a written document and voice performing it is a translation, right? It is its own work of art. And I sell more audiobooks than comparable authors because I understand that. And because I understand it's a different audience too. And all of that for me started in college in the arts and humanities department where I got my, literary degree. a few years ago, I met with the history professor when I wanted to get a PhD in culture, and I didn't know what that looked like. And I met with the literature professor, who's been kind of a core mentor of mine. When I was in Afghanistan, apparently I shot him off an email about some translation concept that I used in war. And he was like, my whole life, no one has ever given me a single useful thing that I've taught them. This is epic. And he put it in his book. This professor who suggested I do there was a undergraduate conference where you could submit a paper and go present a paper. And he suggested I do one. And he was like, you can choose any paper basically that you've written for my class. And I was like, no, I'm going to do a paper on the creation of gods in work of literature with a close reading of Genesis and the Odyssey. Which kind of 20 years later evolved into a chapter on the road to deification, how leaders turn themselves into gods. Got to go back and give him that chapter last year and be like, this is the culmination of my thing. So anyway, one of the big questions, and the reason I got to speak at commencement at UTD one year, that the biggest question that parents ask the Arts and Humanities department is, what is my child going to do with this degree? You have a very fun talk about 10 things you can get paid to do with your Arts and Humanities degree. So, and then I wrote my other mentor, who I was the intelligence officer for the battalion. He was my commander. And I attached the profile on me where I gave myself a job to the intelligence officer for America. Oh, and of course, told both of them that my indie book went into its second 10,000 copy print 10 days into being published, and how it's rather fun to watch the traditional bookstores find out about a book from the internet. So thanks to all of you. And, this other mentor, the military guy, who was just, a good man, and so therefore was brave enough to mentor me, a woman, and to stick through me when things got ugly. And he was one of the only people that encouraged me to write about everything and talk about everything. Some other mentors I had in the professional space were like, don't talk about the cult stuff. Like, talk about the cool stuff you did in the military, but don't talk about the cult stuff. And I was like, I think there's something here. And he was like, talk about everything. He was like, talk about cult, talk about the army, talk about running, talk about being a mom. And I did, all in here. Oh, yeah. I would like everyone to hear my ideas about how I can slash the military budget by a huge amount. I, in fact, since I have more military experience in the Secretary of Defense, have a whole plan for how you can give land back, demilitarize, and pay reparations all at the same time. You tell them to call me when they're ready to pay me what I'm worth to give them those suggestions. Same. Anytime they want to end rape culture, I got a 10-point plan for that I once presented to 12 NATO countries. Yeah. I don't just speak out the ass. I know what I'm doing. That's how I've built a very sustainable brand out of my brain and knitting, which is the topic that we were on. So I don't wear this jacket very much anymore because I'm generally more colorful than that these days, but this is the jacket I wore on the first of the days that changed my life. But really, the day that changed my life was when I was standing barefoot in my kitchen in 2018, and I read this book called Educated, and I said, I'm going to write the next one of those. And boy, did everyone scoff. But these days, it's very common to hear that book, Educated, referred to as uneducated. And I did that. So the reason this ties in, of course, to the Epstein victims and Melissa Gates French interview where she called The Pain Unimaginable. Is that, well, it's one of those books. And it's not a trauma memoir, it's healing. Because it's a book about being very alone. And I still get triggers, but I don't feel alone anymore. I feel like 50,000 people have walked through the story and held my hand. Some of them even leave it good reviews. I've met people. I can picture people. I remember when I realized I could buy my own book as a reseller, authorized reseller from Macmillan, and then sell them signed on my social media. Then I started getting names of people. And I realized, one, I was right. Men would read this book. About 25% of my readership is men. Thanks for being man enough to read books by a woman, which generally is not done. And that I can like picture people's names, right? So it's very healing. And also we talk about the power of owning your story, right? But I've only ever heard it talked about it from the psychological perspective like that. It's healing. I've never heard, but me, so I'm not saying it's not done, but we need to do it more for sure, talk about the power of owning your story. I just decided one day to take this story that I have to live with anyway and spend a huge amount of time and effort and emotions and 30 pounds of loss into developing. And then turn that into a whole sustainable business that hopefully I can do for the rest of my life. I got, I think, my favorite compliment on the Culting of America so far, which is a man who was a captain in the Canadian Army when I was a lieutenant. We fought together in Afghanistan and have been friends for a long time. He is also now an organizational psychologist. He is also, he is in the special operations, major in the special operations of Canada, I think, reserves, something. He does cool stuff. Anyway, he just texted me the other night and he's like, dude, he's the only person allowed to call me dude. He's like, dude, you just did an end run around the need for peer review. This is mind-blowing and amazing. Yes, I did. And I did that by having a big enough platform and a 38-page bibliography. So I just want to say, like, the power of owning your story is also the money and the credibility. And like I say, the money doesn't buy healing, but it can buy a lot of time and space and comfort and self-care for healing and therapy. And I am the opposite of some authors I've heard out there saying, oh my God, we don't need more cult stories. Oh my God, we don't need more trauma stories. We need all the stories, all of them. Y'all, it was apparent to me when I was dropped out of an extremist cult into 2003 Texas and started meeting Americans. And since then, I have lived basically all over the country. It was very apparent to me that a lot of y'all had grown up in cult-like extremism, similar to the Children of God. I used to say, I think the evangelicals are like the Children of God is what the evangelicals want to be. And I think we're seeing that I'm not wrong. The Children of God, which, by the way, performed twice at the White House in the 90s under old HW, after it was well known that they were a pedophile cult. And where is it going with that? Oh, so it was apparent to me that a bunch of y'all had grown up under extremism, but it hadn't really been identified or named yet. And now I think it's fairly safe to say that y'all grew up in MAGA. And we need to have those books. You know, someone said that I am the one that set myself up as someone that knows everything about MAGA, and actually no. I mean, I think maybe I come off a little too harsh that's because I'm shocked by people's shock. Because, like, I grew up outside of the United States. And I had no concept of freedom since I was born enslaved in a sex cult and trafficked around the world for the first almost 16 years of my life. So, like, I'm not from the cult of MAGA. I didn't grow up in evangelical America. Y'all did. We need those stories. We have Tia Levings, a well-trained wife, but she didn't grow up in the core. She was in the core of it as an adult, and she can show us that. Doug Wilson's church, the one that Pete Kegsbreath is in, by the way, except they let him drink, of course. And it's very clear right now that all of that turned into the cult of MAGA. I can track this all the way back to 1930s and the Amy Semple McPherson of it all. And of course, Scientology. When you don't have the weird, unfounded American exceptionalism. Exactly. And it's like, I always say, like, everyone thinks their country is great. Americans are the only ones that are like best in the world. And guess what? The top of my list on both bad groups and bad leaders, a focus on your own uniqueness. And by the way, our 5 countries that are our closest information sharing partners, that other part of my job, the Five Eyes, the English speaking bros that allow New Zealand and Australia to consider themselves Western. Anyway, I can tell you that the United States and the UK have cultier armies than the Canada, the Australia, or the New Zealand. Because calling yourself the is another way of calling yourself the only. And so, it was just a bit of a ramble there. Father was an elder in the FLDS. Yeah. That's another one of those. It's also, like, it's very apparent for me from this video I made yesterday about, like, no, all cults don't end in violence, not even close. But it's only the big ones that, like, formed all of the stereotypes and what most Americans think a cult looks like, which is what they think Jonestown or Waco looks like, because they don't even really know what those look like. But then even when I describe it, because that's pretty similar to what my life looked like before either giant conflagration, they're like, oh, but that's not what my life looked like. But when you see the trends, when you know the tactics, and then when you see it finally develop into this full-blown cult, right? MAGA is obviously now, right, the equivalent of these, like, Jonestown, Waco, Children of God. But, like, it takes time to get there. Yeah, it was yesterday. So anyway, I keep seeing the book software putting, whether Amazon or Goodreads or whatever, putting Uncultured next to Nobody's Girl. And, I haven't read it yet, but I'm not the audience. Victims of child sexual assault are not the audience for tales of child sexual assault unless they want to be. Y'all are the audience. The 3 and 4 that it didn't happen to. So that nobody can say the pain is unimaginable. The pain is very imaginable. We had to describe it in detail. All you got to do is read our books, Melinda Gates French. And maybe you wouldn't have let it go on for so long without saying something. As much as I think that I respect her. Yeah, so anyway. And the more we tell the stories and write the books and make the videos and build the channels, the more people can start to identify the same trends, right? This is one of the reasons some of the most powerful men in the world have been trying to make this go away for decades, and they haven't been able to. And when I tell you, like when they did that news conference and they were like, we're making our own list, there was like, there was an energy shift person. And I'm like, there was an energy shift. I think that was a deep crack in the patriarchy right there. Because these men, with all their fucking power and all their fucking NDAs and all their fucking bullshit, they fucking forgot that pattern of testimony in victims is proof. Because they never deigned to listen to the stories. Yes. When you are 14 and your dad overturns a table and beats it with his fists because you said something, you kind of learn to fear speaking. And when men are hitting objects, it's because they want to be hitting women and children. Not appropriate. This is one of the things I had to go through in my own marriage. It is violent responses to conversation, not appropriate. Not even to large amounts of pain. You don't get to just punch things. And because as much as I know my husband is the gentlest man ever, it reminds me of a thing I often say. Men and women are of equal dignity and intelligence, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but they can often kill us with their bare hands. And all of that needs to be part of the conversation as we build the matriarchy. Yes, all of this. And also driving dangerously with you in the car. That is another form of violent abuse that mostly men engage in. And the more we tell the stories of that, the more we all see the same thing. Spanking is often sexual abuse. If you haven't had that realization yet, here's the key to that one. And it absolutely does not matter whether your parents intended for it to be or not. That is the difference between impact and intent. And this is why I say your children will not forgive you for hitting them, even if you have forgiven your parents. And don't come at me with I was hit and I turned out fine. No, you didn't. You turned into someone that thinks it's okay to hit the tiny humans who are prisoners in your house and dependent on you and fucking love you no matter what you do to them. But I have friends whose parents spanked them a normal amount because of what was done in the culture at the time. And they have since made amends, and their people forgive them. Just the same way that I don't think that the parents of children who died in car crashes without car seats in the 80s should be now hunted down and sent to jail. But if you do it now and your child dies, you should go to jail. And if you are spanking your children now with everything that we know, the APA came out in 2018 and said there are no known benefits and many known harms. Your children are not going to forgive you. And they should not, because you are knowingly abusing them. Yeah, and teaching a child not to hit by hitting them is insane. is she talking about spanking? Oh, read the book. You can listen to it also. Whole different art form to have to record it. You know what nobody thought about, even Daniela? 5-year-old Daniela locked, sorry, 33-year-old Daniela locked in a recording studio reading about 5-year-old Daniela locked in a recording studio with a pedophile. So that was a very interesting education on CPTSD. Because, you can't really dissociate when you're narrating an audiobook. Oh, wait, did somebody ask me what the constant knitting is for? They did it in a misogynistic way. Maybe they didn't intend to, but it felt like it, so I didn't answer. But available in the shop. You don't even know what happened because it's not like I knit with the palm of my hand. But somehow, in an interview last week, I stabbed myself in the palm of the hand. It was very stigmata. No, you can dissociate when it's your own personal story. And in fact, the writing process kind of does that. Especially in my case, since I had a lot of writing help. And I remember I got it and I said to my co-writer, I was like, oh yeah, I know that it's done because I'm reading it and I feel so sad for that little girl. So yeah, the writing process is hard. But I hope if you have been here for most of this, or if you go back and watch it, you will see that it can also have some very tangible good effects. I always say, like, everything I was afraid of happened. Family threatened to sue me. People don't talk to me anymore. I don't usually go to the family things. But, like, most of it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And a lot of good things have happened. More good things have happened. So, and the whole point, as I told said family member, was, I needed to take my pain and this painful story that had already happened to me, darn nothing I could do about it, and turn it into like something meaningful, something that helped people. And I did. And that makes a difference. I didn't think it would make as much of a difference in healing me as it did. Because writing a book is a whole different kind of deconstruction. You're not just like on your own schedule anymore. So, at some point, we'll do some kind of course on how I did this. Yeah, the writing helped a lot. Especially the way that I ended up writing it. Okay, so long story short, right? 2018, I listened to Educated. I'm like, I need to write the next one of those, but it's going to take me 10 years to learn to write a good memoir. I need to write it in 2 because there's a cult leader in the fucking White House right now. Wrote it in 4. Or wrote it in 3, got it out in 4. In 2022, when nobody was really thinking about cults that much. Anyway, little did we know we were going to get a whole nother go round. Oh, Thomas Jefferson Epstein. I like it. I'm going to take that from now on, please. Is that his actual name? Even if it's not, that is excellent. No, of course not, because his name was Jeffrey. And I was thinking about this today. I need to make a video on this because, like, I'm a big part of cult stuff is, deconstructing cults is taking off the language afterward, right? And the language is usually the last thing we give up. Like when I meet someone from the Children of God, and they're still calling it, well, they're still calling it the group. One of my homework assignments for them is always like, you need to start calling it the cult. If they're still calling it the family, that they're free to do that because that was their lived experience. So was mine. But I have just decided, like, I don't let cults be referred to by their chosen name. Nope. Sorry. You get your birth name. Suck it. Children of God. So I've been just renaming things. I think I get to do that as a modern day philosopher and someone with a bachelor's degree in English. So, like, I came up with Sacred Moose because I was informed that Sacred Cow is kind of falling into that, hey, it's not that sensitive since there are kind of millions of people that think cows are sacred, believe the cows are sacred, right? Like, that's a belief system, and that was a Western white thing. But my only problem was that I actually need that term because I talk about it, especially in regards to AA. So I came up with Sacred Moose, and it gets the point across, allows me to have the conversation about why I chose it. Delegations from Canada and Native peoples have assured me that it's moose are not sacred. And so my next one that I'm taking on now is balls. I will never again say has the balls to. I only say has the ovaries. Like, balls are sensitive as fuck. And like, sperm are not even strong. When I was the teaching assistant for a gender studies class, I learned that sperm don't even swim. They just go like this. The ovum draws them in, and they just go like this. They're just a little screwdriver, and most of them die. Like, what the fuck? Patriarchal gaslighting bullshit. It's had the balls to do. No. You don't have the ovaries to serve your country in the ways that I have done, sir. Say what you want about my rainbow hair. So, there we go. No, the military is not going to make any deep changes to our country. I don't think. Although it is fun for me when I talk about, like, rape culture or whatever in the military, and people are like, well, the military is not your social proving ground. Because I love a well, actually moment. And, well, actually, the military has always been the social proving ground. We desegregated the military before we desegregated America. Yes, we did. Yeah. History is fun. Hey, I wrote a history book. Nobody in the military walks on the grass. So I will never accept a single person saying that they can't control rape. Give me control of that fucking base. I will have all the rapes down to 0 in 3 days. So easy. When the military decided they wanted to change DUI culture, they did it in under a decade. And they did it by doing 2 things. They made it unexplainable. The alcohol didn't make you drink. And they made it unforgivable. Nobody was going to stand up for you. It is generally an absolute career ender. And you know what? During my time in the military, while there are always, of course, soldiers doing stupid things, I was shocked when I would go home to Dallas and people would have 8 drinks and get in the car. Not ever in a military town do you have more than 2 drinks and get in a car. And even 2 is shiesty. And because of that, most military towns have like a $5 taxi that, like, anyone on active duty can get home for only $5 on weekends. They build social programs to help the things they care about. When commanders are going to be judged by their handle on weapons, they have the soldiers count their weapons every hour on the hour. When a sensitive piece of equipment goes missing, something like a rifle or a pair of night vision goggles, for 60 minutes, the base shuts down, and everybody on that base, from general to private, does what they call hands across America until they find that piece of sensitive equipment. And yet when Vanessa Guillen, a woman, went missing, they didn't even look for her for 60 days. The military knows what the fuck they're doing. But Daniela, I'm asked, do you really think there even can be war without rape? You know what I do? And you know why I think that? Because I went to war for 18 months and I raped no people. It's almost like the real reason the boys don't want the women to play in the sandbox is because we tend to put a stop to the raping and the pillaging that they consider to be the spoils of war. Rape was not made a war crime until 1996. And so I told them, ladies, as I still tell people now waiting for me to trip up, I know the thing I lived. I know how to talk about this topic. Yeah. Nobody walks in the grass. Nobody carries anything in their right hand, so it's always free to salute. Most of us still do that for years or decades, even after we get out of the military. I'm so petty about walking on the grass these days. And you know, you step on the grass on a military base. Who's walking on the sergeant major's grass? But never once have I heard anyone scream about raping the sergeant major soldiers. The military is so good at preventing fratricide when we care. So good. We're also going to start having the conversation about how all men in the military are also sexually assaulted. They just code it as hazing. That's going to be a hard one for a lot of you bros, military or not. Don't worry, I'm here for it. I got at least 50 more years of knitting and talking and writing books to do. So, you know, one of the things I got to last in my healing was the anger. And like one of the things was just like being angry as I have a better and better relationship with my mom that like I didn't get raised by her. And so that part of the anger is like you don't ever get that time back. So anyway, as we know, my mom's only 15 years older than me. So sometimes we dream about being in a retirement home. She's 90, I'm 75. We're just, you know, spinning the yarns and spinning the yarns. We're going to have the coolest freaking retirement home. We're going to do all the crafts. We're going to have a good time. Therapists, organizational psychologists who focus on the bad guys. Beware of anyone that knows a lot about influence tactics because they can do it if they want to. So therapy in many different modalities can be a wonderful and maybe the most helpful healing tool in the arsenal potentially available out there. And therapists can be extremely psychologically and emotionally abusive. They can also be incompetent and harm you in other ways. And there's many like therapist-led cults out there. You know, NLP fucking Nexium's one of his right-hand women was a therapist. So like, you know, every time I say this, I'm like, you know, all the cult leaders study each other. That's why you got to beware of anyone that knows a lot about the bad guy, right? David Berg's heroes were Castro and Muammar Gaddafi and Rasputin. Yes, Rasputin. was his helper in the spirit. Another crazy man who led a sex cult. And so people say we should be wary of you. Yes. I mean, I get stuck at that coercing and manipulating people in order to exploit them part. But if I decided to build a cult, it would be the best one. So if I invite you to my compound, maybe don't come. Or have a very good escape plan that is not a car we can get you to donate to the cult. I am angry. My anger makes me so much money. Imagine not being angry right now. Weird. Damn it. I was about to make more coffee, but I'm out of coffee. I don't even know if I can call myself a Latin American soul if I'm out of coffee. We are still seeing you today, question mark. He said that she was saying her husband went to a Christian therapist. Yeah. So that brings up another topic, which is if you have been made to have sex for Jesus, that wasn't consent. This is something I thought I only had to tell people like survivors of the children of God until I realized that a lot of evangelical women, Mormon women, Catholic women needed to be told that. This is also a good point. I'm tired of people telling me my trauma isn't their problem and my trauma is triggered by being exposed to literal abuse culture. Yeah, like everybody who has lived under any kind of authoritarian leadership has been triggered for a fucking decade. And like, we know how to survive. We are useful assets right now. Some of us are taking advantage of that, being here for you, but like, we're tired. We are maybe also not the soft place for everyone who voted for the authoritarians to land when they just wake up. I'm going to try to be, because I'm a goddamn professional, but we'll see. And because somebody needs to stand in between MAGA, ex-MAGA, and their actual intended victims, of which I'm not one. I'm going to make tea because I do have black tea. I was just in the middle of doing dishes, like dishwasher half open. And then I just walked upstairs, got my laptop, and started a planned live, just like right in the middle. This is when you don't need an ADHD diagnosis. I saw this thing that was a leash for the ADHD spouse. It was just like on the door of a kitchen. That's so great. Just I was walking by, I'm like, whoops. I love that I walked upstairs, got a laptop, and like, oh my goodness. There you have it. There you have it. And I forgot the tea. Not Coos coffee. We're just going to heat up coffee. Just going to heat up coffee. You see how we got a whole box of 100 Knitting Cult Lady mugs, and it was a misprint. It says Knitting Cult Lad. They won't even let you be a woman to do this job, y'all. They won't even let me be a lady. It's a really good mug. They're nice. They're big. I mean, I drink my morning veteran coffee in a thermos so that it stays warm for the 2 hours that I need to drink coffee to feel stable for. I like really big mugs, but they get cold so fast. And I cannot stand a cold coffee. Iced coffee was invented by demons. And it was fun living in the Pacific Northwest, and like walking up to a little coffee cart and be like, "You want that iced or hot?" And I'd be like, "Hot." And it's like 90 degrees. And I'm like, "Give me my coffee hot. Always, forever." I grew up in Brazil. What is this iced coffee? Brazilians make so much fun of Americans because we put cold milk in hot coffee. That's like one of the things about America that Brazilians don't understand. And I'm about to put cold milk in hot coffee because I'm lazy. Brazilians are not lazy. You know how like every culture is really good at like different things? Brazilians are really good at cleaning. They have a whole word for the like regular deep cleaning of your house, faxina. Here, I pay for it once a year. In Brazil, I would be doing it myself once a week or maybe once a month. So anyways, like a bad therapist or a good evil therapist, right? Like I always think it's funny when people call somebody a bad leader, because I'm like, well, the bad leaders are the ones you've never heard of, right? Nobody will follow them, even to a couch. Shady Vance. Effective leaders can be positive or negative. And that is why I labeled my chapter on charismatic leadership a Hitler or a Churchill. I don't know whether he really have to couch or not, but I sure as hell am going to make jokes about it. If he ever becomes the president, we're going to have so much ex-Marine content. There's no such thing as an ex-Marine. They like to say I didn't write my own book. But in addition to not even giving a name to the man who assaults me in Afghanistan, I identify him as an ex-Marine, in lowercase Marine, because I really wanted to see who would come for me. Don't have to make art all by yourself for it to be your art, friends. I have a policy of assembling a brilliant team, sprinkling about as much credit and money as I can, and then making good stuff. It's fun too. And it's really fun to not publish products by yourself. Because in America, you're not allowed to be proud, in the cult of America, you're not allowed to be proud of anything you did by yourself. So if people are like, oh my gosh, Danielle, on culture is really good, I'm not culturally allowed to just be like, I know. But what I am culturally allowed to do is be like, thank you. We worked really hard on it. And I'm glad it spoke to you. And then call my partner and celebrate with her. So this whole live can be summed up by there are less rules than ever before right now, y'all. If you don't know it yet, we are in times of social transition. This is when cults show up. I've been saying, we know this is a time of social change because there's a cult documentary on Netflix every other day, right? And yes, it's scary, and yes, it's anxious. But if you survive it, you get to build whatever you want. That can be applied to the country, that can be applied to a business. So I did, on top of everything, use my military experience in VA bill to get a, not even GI Bill, vocational rehab, to get a $50,000 master's degree from Harvard for free. And I don't know if my mom is more impressed with that or the fact that I really built a legitimate business that's employing like 8 people right now out of knitting and reading books. And sometimes writing them. Also, this one time I came home from a networking event and I was definitely like overstimulated, but feeling what I call high on people. And then my husband was like, too bad you can't monetize this. And I said, watch me. He didn't say monetize. He's not that fancy. He said, too bad that can't be your business. And I said, watch me. Anyway, we booked out the whole restaurant for the book launch. Yeah. I'm in a week of good celebrations. Happens to be right at a time that my friend Danielle is in town for like 2 days in between deployments. Poor thing just had to be in the Netherlands in an American Army uniform while Greenland was going on. So that's rough. Cult survivors who have been screaming forever should get to sit it out for a while. I mean, you definitely don't owe anyone anything. And I have to make that so much more clear when I speak because I was being misinterpreted, especially by certain communities, like people that MAGA has targeted. So I don't want to be like insensitive to that. You know, like I have forgiven one person from the children of God. And that's my mother. And like other survivors, obviously, but like, and that's because my mother has made an unmitigated apology, a lifetime attempt to make amends, and lets me talk about my trauma however I want, and doesn't try to tell me what to do with my life because she understands she can't. But I have not forgiven anyone else from the cult. And neither can I forgive them because there has been no apology, no attempts at restitution, right? So all that to say, I, saw, I think it was Threads or something from a Black man. And he was like, MAGA, I am not your soft place to land, ex-MAGA. Like, go find white people for that. And that is like 1,000% fair, right? And sometimes it's because obviously it's so fundamental to me that I am a victim of cult joiners that I forget that not everyone understands that first and foremost, before anyone else did anything to me, cult joiners victimized me, right? So I'm really proud of Culting of America because it got a lot of reviews that like the author treats the topic with such empathy. And I think cult babies have more empathy toward cult joiners than even other cult joiners, right? Like we know, nobody has to tell me that cult joiners are humans. I know that they raised me, right? I know there are good people in the sex cult too, and what that means. And I still haven't entirely forgiven them either, but I am not a victim primarily of MAGA. So I am probably someone that can hold space for ex-MAGA as they are coming out. Because it is true, first of all, when cults fall apart, we see a lot of family annihilators. That was true in Nazi Germany. That's potentially going to be true here. And while I completely understand that people might welcome that, might whatever, Everyone's always like, they chose to join a cult, they chose to turn their eyes. I like to remind everyone that 25 children died in Waco and none of them chose that. The children never get to choose. So if you can find space in your heart to care, that can be a thing. Then it might be helpful to know that scholars and experts have found that if cult leavers have a soft place to land, it can be more successful. That absolutely in no way implies that it is the space of anyone whose hideous ideology that MAGA has victimized needs to, give space to them. And many of you who are the children of MAGA people, you are their victims too, right? So you don't have to give space to them. And by the way, who am I to tell you have to do anything, right? These are all choices that you can make, and I remember I found it so freeing as I was publishing Uncultured that Tara Westover, who is the author of Educated, said, I've realized that it is okay to love some people and yet not have them in your life. And I think for complicated cult victimized families, that's a good quote. As we say, whenever everyone says, what's your relationship with your family and you're a cult survivor? The answer is, it's complicated. This stuff is not binary. That's right. I have given up using the language of black and white. That's another one. I have a good footnote about it in my book. So I try to use binary thinking instead. But people, this is the thing I found, by the way, so going back to even before I started writing Uncultured, and I was just, how this really all started for me was I was driving home from my dead-end Microsoft job that I hated, and I was listening to a book called Never Eat Alone, and it talks about this survey that people who do public speaking make more money than people who don't across industries. And I was like, what am I an expert on? That whole, what could I speak about for 30 minutes untrained? And I came up with 2 topics: growing up in a cult and being a woman in the military. And I started getting on stages, and 9 months later I had a TED Talk. I was not ready, but it's okay. No one watches the video, but everyone sees the photo. And, so I was saying like, I talk about growing up in a cult, one of the world's worst cults, and being a woman in the army. And people immediately, they want to push that story into a binary, right? And people would say to me, well, that's an obviously evil cult. Nothing's obviously evil in the place where it came from. And 2, well, the U.S. Army is a wonderful organization, because I was in the helping veteran space. And I was like, also not my experience. And also, if we really zoom out, the U.S. military is 1.3 million humans trained to kill other humans as efficiently as possible, and or radicalized to conduct violence on behalf of state. So maybe it's not that binary. And also, one of the things that I tell you all about going through the decade of deconstruction and learning how to tell your stories, even if it's just to your people, not the world, is you get all of it back, right? Like, they ruined my career in the military for laughs, essentially. But the second I got out of the military, it was like the last 3 years that I didn't count, basically. Second I got out of the military, it all counted. There's that honorable discharge, and all my shit counts, and all my stories are important. And your bad stories are just as important as your good stories, right? I never would have got to tell my stories in the wonderful U.S. Army, because nobody reads them, but I did because of my cult story. Like, when I thought to myself after Vanessa Guillen's death, why does America fucking care? And then it was like, oh man, nobody reads them. America doesn't know what happens to the daughters of America when we disappear behind the high commune walls of the Department of Defense. And I said to myself, somebody needs to bleed their story onto the page and then get such a big book deal that they can do it in the shadow of the Pentagon without asking permission to protest them. And then 1 second later, I was like, fuck, that's me, isn't it? Because I have the cult story. And I just knew I could do it. I've been told I need to write a book since I was 15, I wrote a stunningly bad book proposal when I was 24 in Afghanistan. It was called The Girl from Nowhere. Now that's one of the paragraphs I'm the most proud of in Uncultured. But also, I'm not the girl from nowhere anymore. I'm the girl from everywhere. And if I do ever decide to be a politician, I cannot be a carpetbagger because I am a born American that does not have a hometown. That's how you get every state to vote for you, isn't it? Anyone wants me for VP? No, I don't think I can be president or vice president because of being born abroad. Anyway, so I hope so. And I hope I've inspired people. And I was intentionally trying to kick the door down for other stories about women in the military and even other stories for trauma survivors and cult survivors. And I think not only did I kick the door down, but I built a whole process to do it yourself without the big guys. And I think I'm about 6 months away from writing checks to invest in other people's books. And that was what was fun about when I got the editor's pick, Amazon, boo, but still, for Culting of America. Because that was the second Publishers Weekly great review, Kirkus great review, Amazon editor's pick. And that tells me that my process for creating good books works. Didn't have to do it all by myself, just had to stand up to the criticism for not doing it all by myself. And I don't care. The biggest criticism is Daniela doesn't deserve a book the quality of Uncultured without suffering through it all by herself. And that is not what I promised Macmillan. I promised them that I would produce a product that was brilliant and that people would trade $28.99 for in the tens or hundreds of thousands. And I did. And part of what felt like therapy to me and was certainly healing to me, because one of the things with cult survivors is being separated from your emotions, was having these two other women help me write my story, give their very words to my life story. I was born a soldier, the line that sold the book. I did not come up with that. That was Amy Reed. My current policy is Amy gets whatever she wants as long as she keeps writing books with me. And look at that. It's still my name on the book. So I hope this has inspired you. What I tell people now that are just developing their ideas is as soon as you can get your idea out of your head and onto something, you can find other people to help you. That can just be a list of all the years of your life and stuff about it and a stunningly bad book proposal. And still the partner that I originally brought on, former publishing executive at Penguin Random House, said I was the best prepared client she'd ever seen. That can also be a book deal. That can be, in the case of the musical that I'm writing, Cult Baby, the musical, veterans included. As soon as I wrote the whole concept script, right? I have performed it out here on YouTube. What existed then more exists now, but you can do, and you don't have to do anything alone. And that's what I've said to the critics. I've never done multi-million-dollar projects by myself, not in the United States Army, not out here. And I didn't set out to write good books about group behavior without a good group. Because I do not care about credit. And this is probably one of the benefits I get from growing up in a cult. I do not care about getting individual credit for my thing or group credit for my thing. This was something I loved about the intelligence community. We deny the concept of plagiarism in the intelligence community. No such thing. You can't get in trouble. Because the point is getting the shit to the people who need it as fast as you can. Does that mean there's not all kinds of boo, rah, 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 and it matters that I wrote the book on drones? Of course not. But this concept, there it is. I also used it to get us unkicked out of spy school, but that's a story for another time. And I just, I always say, even with money, I'm like, I absolutely do not care about sharing a percentage of money I never would have earned without somebody. Or as I say in Uncultured, without Brandy, the co-parent, Uncultured, would still be just a twinkle in my eye. And she took a chance on me, and now she gets 25% of a book that has sold, 50,000 copies and counting. So everything that the big publishing houses can do, you can find author services to do that. If you can invest in your own book and you can build a platform to sell it, you can do all kinds of stuff without asking permission anymore. So I will leave this to say, there is a dude out there. He does look like an ex-Mormon. Pretty blonde dude, blue eyes, right? Curly hair. And what he does, what his channel is I think his name is Ryan or something. I don't know. He reads 1-star reviews of places that get reviews, like hotels, restaurants, flights. And then he goes on them. And then he can only leave them a 5-star review, but he can't tell a lie. And when I sat down and watched it with my kid for 3 hours one day, and it's like he's flying on the most expensive airline in the world, paid for just free from a client, blah, blah, blah. Like, there are no rules. Nobody thought the market for knitting and talking about bad guys was going to be good. And that is blue ocean strategy. That is what every entrepreneur wants, when you build your own market and then you're the only competition in it, at least for a time. Until the rest of them catch up. That's why I'm not the knitting cult lady. And because it's culty. All right. Got to go do other things. Thanks for hanging out. 1:11:33. Oh my God. That's like, you got to make a wish on that time or something. Have a day. Self-publishing, we call it indie publishing now, if you want. But how are you going to sell it? What is your sales process? Okay, that's the question you need to answer. No, you can't do an anonymous memoir. No, you can't just rely on the gatekeepers, the big publishing houses. They don't know how to sell anymore. You have to figure out how you are going to sell it. I am selling more books than anyone out there because I am doing it myself. I'm building my own platforms and I'm influencing my own products that I built to help you right now, that I put themes in, and themes are markets. I sold a copy of my book to Kara Goucher, former US Olympic marathoner, because I talk about running a marathon. And I told her she was a hero of mine when I was deployed to Bagram and I won a marathon, which I wrote about in this book. So what's one thing? Your life story is not about you. It's about an idea. The idea of Uncultured is people will do anything to fit into their voluntary groups. I'm going to show you that in the microsystem of the cult and the macro system of the US Army. What's your one idea? What are your themes? And then make a good story around that. And then how are you going to sell it? All right.